Will a vaccine change your DNA? Is there such a thing as a God gene, a genetic code that predisposes a person to believe in God? And will the vaccine damage it? And why is there something known as Luciferase or Luciferase in the COVID vaccine? That and a whole bunch more of genetic-based stuff are what we're talking about today, and we're starting right now. It has been suggested by some that the coronavirus vaccine may damage or change the supposed God gene to cause someone to lose their faith. Is that true? And why is there that horrible sounding enzyme, Luciferase, in the vaccine? The reason that these two items are hot topics is the general lack of trust in the government and the medical community in regards to the upcoming COVID vaccines. And for one, I am not happy about a lot that the government has done in regard to this pandemic. But that doesn't mean that every story with a negative twist is true. We are to take every thought captive. So as a community, we really need to discuss this so that we can all more readily make informed decisions about the vaccine. We'll start with the God gene. What made the God gene famous is this video featuring a man who looks like Bill Gates discussing a vaccine against religious expression.
Excuse me, on the left over here, we have individuals who are religious fundamentalists, religious fanatics, and this is the expression, RT-PCR, real-time PCR expression of the VMAT2 gene. Over here, we have individuals. So let me complete. So over here we have individuals who are not particularly fundamentalist, not particularly religious, and you can see there's a much reduced expression of this particular gene, the VMAT2 gene. Another evidence that supports our hypothesis for the development of this approach.
What you see here is by spreading this virus, we're going to eliminate individuals from donning on a bomb vest and going into a market and blowing up the market.
So our hypothesis is that these are fanatical people, that they have overexpression of the VMAT2 gene, and that by vaccinating them against this, we'll eliminate this behavior. So we have some very, very remarkable data in this next slide. Here we have two brain scans. These are fMRIs. These are two different individuals with different levels of expression of VMAT2. On top is an individual who's a religious fanatic, an individual, and we've repeated this numerous times, that has high levels of VMAT2. Now, this individual down here who had low levels of the VMAT2 gene, this individual would self-describe as not particularly religious. In each case, these individuals were read a religious text. This individual lit up the right middle frontal gyrus, shown here, and that's a part of the brain that's associated with theory of mind. It's a part of the brain that has to do with intents and beliefs and desires. In marked contrast, here's an individual who would not particularly self-describe as religious, and when they're read a religious text, what you see is that this part of the brain called the anterior insula lights up. This is a part of the brain that's associated with disgust or displeasure on hearing something.
So you're suggesting I take a CT scan with me when I'm evaluating people to determine whether I put a bullet in their head?
So the data that I'm presenting here supports the concept that we're proposing, and I think that we would not propose to do CT scans or fMRIs on individuals out in the hinterlands of Afghanistan. The virus would immunize against this VMAT2 gene, and that would have the effect that you see here, which is it's essentially to turn a fanatic into a normal person. And we think that will have major effects in the Middle East.
How would you
Before we discuss the God gene, let's first discuss this infamous video. It appears to present a leaked video of Bill Gates presenting a vaccine and a plan to immunize religious fanatics against the God gene, also known as VMAT2, to the Pentagon, and a vaccine called FunVac, designed to eliminate religious expression. In the video, the attendees discuss that religious fundamentalists would pose less of a threat if they received the vaccine. Given that the video is supposedly dated in 2005, this discussion seemed to be aimed at Muslim extremists, but frankly, today, I think many in the government equate Christians as being more dangerous than Muslims. So, is this video the real thing, or is it a hoax? Well, in a word, it's a hoax, and for many reasons. First, facial recognition analysis of the speaker shows it isn't Bill Gates. Second, the date of the video is 2005, but the brain scans shown on the slideshow come from a 2010 case article from neurology.org. And the video is awkwardly staged, with some of the actors actually looking right at the camera and speaking to it in some of the versions. This video seems to have been done in reaction to a book that came out in 2004 about the God gene. That book, The God Gene, How Faith is Hardwired into Our Genes, was the work of Dr. Dean Hammer, a geneticist. He proposed that a specific gene called, and get this, vesicular monoamine transporter 2, or VMAT2, predisposes humans towards spiritual or mystic experiences. The God gene hypothesis rests on the secular idea that human spirituality, in fact everything in human experience, is genetically determined, that we inherit the tendency to believe in God, and the author attributes this to the gene VMAT2, which acts by altering monoamine levels. This would of course mean that some people are genetically predisposed to believe and others aren't, reinforcing that atheist worldview. Not surprisingly, Hammer has also done research on the gay gene. He seems to be driven to try and prove science over faith. But secular science itself isn't supportive of the concept. Popular science writer Carl Zimmer points out that the God gene theory is based only on Hammer's one and only study, an unpublished, unreplicated study. In the brain, VMAT2 acts as a pump. In the words of developmental biologist and science blogger P.Z. Myers, it's a pump, a teeny tiny pump, responsible for packaging a neurotransmitter for export during brain activity. Yes, it's important, and it may even be active and necessary during higher order processing like religious thought. But one thing it isn't is a God gene. Psychologists test people on the ability to value things above yourself. Religious expression falls into this category, as do things like believing in aliens or belonging to a political party. VMAT2 levels in the brain alter these self-transcendent scores, but by no more than 1%. So its impact on religious thought is extremely minimal. But it does serve an important function. There are actually drugs that inhibit VMAT2 on the market, and they are used to treat hyperkinetic movement diseases similar to Parkinsonism. So if VMAT2 was missing, if the gene producing all VMAT2 was eliminated, what would happen? There are actually scientific studies about this. Neurotransmission, or the way our brain works, would be dramatically reduced, inhibiting thinking and mood, to the ability to regulate body movements and muscle control, kind of like making people into zombies. Eliminating this gene could even be life-threatening. So the very idea of a vaccine against a gene producing VMAT2 is pretty much nonsense. And if you think about it, the idea of a gene predisposing people to have faith is the opposite of being saved by grace. Which brings us to the enzyme Luciferase, or Luciferase. Why is this such a big deal? Well, It's found in the COVID-19 vaccine, and obviously it has the worst name ever. Anything named after Lucifer causes one to pause and ask, why is that? And we really should ask that question. Luciferase is a category of naturally occurring compounds that cause bioluminescence in animals such as fireflies. This classification of compounds are named this way because the name Lucifer, as it's found in the Bible, means light bearer and has nothing to do with Satan in terms of this category of compounds. It's related to light, not evil. In fact, the ability to glow and transmit light is one of God's coolest creations. If scientists named this group of compounds after Lucifer, well, that should reflect on them, not on the God-created compound. Luciferase can be produced in the lab through genetic engineering for a number of purposes. Luciferase genes can be synthesized and inserted into organisms like mice, silkworms, and potatoes. In biological research, luciferase is commonly injected into experimental animals. In other words, it's genetically added to the animal cells to make those cells slightly luminescent. In combination with the material luciferin, it can cause these cells to glow. So scientists can track them and judge how they are working. But what is it doing in COVID-19 vaccine? Good question. Believe it or not, it has already been in use in several other medical applications to see if the therapy is working. You may have already had luciferase and not known it. And that is why it's in the vaccine, to judge if a person still has antibodies against COVID-19. The Texas Medical Center has explained how luciferase helps doctors visually confirm if COVID-19 antibodies are being formed, making the turnaround time of a follow-up diagnosis like 12 times faster than other methods. Given the vast scope of vaccinating an entire world, this will be needed. Luciferase is harmless, just terribly, terribly named. And finally, some are concerned about the vaccine using messenger RNA, that it will genetically modify us to something less than being human. Messenger RNA is the compound in the body that causes the body to manufacture proteins. This vaccine that's coming out is a new type of vaccine. It's a messenger RNA vaccine. And this type of vaccine works by introducing a messenger RNA molecule into your body, which causes cells to produce a protein that resembles one of the viral proteins that make up the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Not a dangerous part, just a part. Then, your immune system creates antibodies against this protein, so that later, when the real virus is introduced, the antibodies destroy it. The time that this RNA survives in the body cells is relatively brief, just a couple hours, just long enough to have your cells make the proteins for those few hours, then it's gone. So while there are other concerns about messenger RNA vaccines, such as the length of protection against the virus, which is likely very short, and possible side effects, changing the DNA is not one of them. The messenger RNA does not change your DNA. This brings up the most important question of all. Should you take the vaccine? Not being an infectious disease doctor, it isn't my place or this channel's place to say. This channel cannot evaluate medical safety. What we do know is the known side effects are flu-like symptoms for a couple days. There will likely also be long-term effects that are currently unknown, as we find with many vaccines. Maybe by the time this is ready for the general public, more will be known, but right now, the long-term effects are completely unknown. But getting the virus itself, of course, can lead to death or severe, even permanent damage to organs. So, Every single individual is going to have to weigh the risks for yourself, and we suggest doing that after much prayer. A very good friend and member of my house church is also a healthcare provider, and he was part of the initial Pfizer vaccine trial. He ended up getting flu-like symptoms with the second shot for about 24 hours. If you do get the vaccine, he suggests taking the next day off of work after that second injection. However, spiritually, the vaccine seems safe. Nothing in the vaccine will make you lose your faith, and no one, as of yet, is asking you to worship the Antichrist as a condition of taking the vaccine. However, it is very hard to accept coming from people that you don't trust. I know this channel is not a fan of either Bill Gates or Tony Fauci. From what we have seen, however, the tracking mechanisms and apps that have been designed are much more dangerous spiritually than the vaccine itself. I want you to see how. You can click right here to keep watching how we might go from the Great Reset right up to the Mark of the Beast. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.